This episode of Keys to the Shop is brought to you by Prima Coffee. Whether it's espresso machines, manual brewing devices, or general coffee shop needs, they seek to pursue the most innovative coffee products, both domestic and abroad, to offer their customers. Find out more at prima-coffee.com. This is Keys to the Shop Founder Friday edition. Today we're talking with Nathan Quillo of Quills Coffee in Louisville, Kentucky. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. So before we dive in here to our Founder Friday episode for October, I just want to thank our sponsor here at Keys to the Shop, and that is Prima Coffee. Now, if you're not familiar with who Prima Coffee is, they are a specialty coffee equipment supplier, and they're based out of Louisville, Kentucky. That's right here where I am based. And from the beginning of their company, they've set out to make the best coffee brewing equipment available to the general public. And their focus has always been on curating the best equipment for every need. That goes from grinders to espresso machines, under-counter fridges, home brewing setups, coffee brewers, everything that you can think of that you think, geez, I wonder if they have that. Yeah, they probably do. So go to prima-coffee.com and check it out for yourself. It's a great website, very user-friendly. There's a lot of great free resources at prima-coffee.com where you can learn more about the equipment that they sell. And they just put a lot of research into these things. They curate what they have very well. And they do put a big emphasis on having that expertise that's going to help their customers get the right gear to fit every situation. And I've known them for a while. I use them in the stores here, and I can vouch for them for sure. So I would encourage you, go to prima-coffee.com. Check it out for yourself. I know you'll be pleased with your experience with them. And my thanks again to Prima Coffee for their support of Keys to the Shop and supporting us as a community with the tools we need to do our jobs well. So today is a very special Founder Friday because we get to talk to Nathan Quillo, who is the founder of the local favorite Quills Coffee. We recently recorded an episode where it was Baristas Speak Volume 2. That took place at the Kentuckiana Coffee Champs, and that was hosted at Quills. And we got to talk with Nathan a little bit there. And now we get a bigger chunk of time where we get to really dive in and explore his journey and the story of Quills, the things that he has learned along the way as an owner, the lessons that he has learned through challenges, what have been the successful tactics and values that have brought Quills through from one shop 10 years ago to now it's going to be 6 shops pretty soon. And they have a local presence, but they also have a regional and even national presence. So how did that all happen? This is their 10-year anniversary, and a lot has happened in 10 years. So we get to explore all of those things. I love the people at Quills. I always have a great experience when I go in there. They're very active in the coffee community. A lot of great latte artists, a lot of great barista competitors. And also back in June in 2015, they won America's Best Coffee House competition. Like I said, great people. And so this was a special thrill for me to be able to dive in a little bit deeper into the story of Quills. And I think you're going to find it really inspirational and helpful as well. I certainly did. So let me bring you to my conversation right now with the founder of Quills Coffee in Louisville, Kentucky, Nathan Quillo. Well, hello, Nathan Quillo. Welcome to Keys to the Shop.
Thanks, man. I've been looking forward to it since we chatted a couple weeks back, so it's good to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on.
Here remotely. So.
Kind of remotely, kind of locally. Doing a telephone or Skype interview in the same city. It seems kind of surreal, doesn't it?
I know. I thought, why is he doing that? But I was like, he's got to record this thing and edit it down and make it sound pretty. So,
yeah. One of the last episodes we did was at your place, the Baristas Speak episode, which was a fantastic time. Thank you for hosting the Barista Coffee Champs.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah. You guys have just been really, really busy. It's your 10-year anniversary this year, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, 10 years, and well, it was in April. It was 10 years.
So there are a lot of projects that you've got going on, and we're going to get to that as we go in the episode. But of course, as is a tradition here on Founder Friday, really want to know what kind of started this dream for you. Where 10 years back, what was the first thought that kind of sparked your interest in starting a coffee shop? And were you already into coffee?
Yeah, I was. It starts way back. I guess it was a dark and stormy night. I grew up around just food and hospitality, but one of the most vivid memories I have as a kid, well, there's two of them that stick out, and they both kind of revolve around the smell of. One is of spaghetti sauce, and then the other is of coffee. My dad used to make a homemade spaghetti sauce. We're from an Italian family, and every Friday he made spaghetti sauce while listening to NPR. And so I can just remember the smell of that sauce and the tone from the NPR call theme, coming on around 5:30 in the evening. And then the other one is every morning my mom would make coffee every morning, and I just loved to smell the coffee can, and I never could figure out why it didn't taste the way it smelled. When I was younger. But yeah, I've been into the idea of good flavors and making good things taste well for a long time. So
those are some pretty strong memories. Scent has such a great sort of impact on our lives.
Oh, it is. I mean, and my parents were always hosting dinner parties and, very involved in the community and involved in their in their work lives and their colleagues and having people over, whether it was for coffee, for tea. And I think that's a carryover from when we lived in Europe and then we moved to the States. I think they brought some of that European hospitality, tea time, dinner time, coffee time back to the States with them. And I think because it was new for a lot of the neighbors really enjoyed that they would be proactive around food and beverage. That didn't just include alcohol, which I always thought was really great, and obviously it left an impression on me. So I've always been interested. Learned how to cook when I was young. Would help my folks in the kitchen, with the spaghetti sauce or with all the other meals, and really enjoyed it. Didn't mind doing dishes and cleaning up. I thought that was just a great way to, build relationships and build community, whether it was with my family or my friends, and kind of carried on all the way through my life. And to the coffee question, I mean, when I really got serious about it was, I'd say in the 90s, say probably around 1992, I stumbled into a local coffee shop here in Louisville, and it was, the total Seattle scene, grunge type of coffee shop, and I just loved it. I loved everything about it. And they've been doing coffee for a while. At the time, I thought it was the best thing in the world, and I would go to that coffee shop and a few others that I discovered, and sit and do the coffee shop thing, read, write, journal, drink coffee, meet people, get together with friends. And then I went on a trip out west and I discovered Starbucks, and we didn't have Starbucks around here. And I started mail ordering. It's so funny. I used to get actual paper catalogs from Starbucks, and I would mail order, French press parts or replacement screens, or their new Christmas blend. And I just thought that was the greatest thing in the world. And, but I would make French press for my friends, whether we were getting together for brunch or, in the afternoon on a Saturday or Sunday in the afternoon, I'd make coffee, and everybody thought it was great. And just over time, as I traveled to different cities, I always explore where are the local breweries, the local restaurants, where do the locals like to go eat and drink, and through that discovered more and more coffee shops.
So you discovered coffee in your hometown now of Louisville, and
right.
you could have just been a customer for a while, just an enthusiast, really. You could have started a spaghetti sauce business, but
I could have.
Yeah. But you decided to start a coffee business, which, depending on what Kenya you're tasting at what time, you might reminisce about spaghetti sauce. But what was it that created this interest? Like, what made you decide, I'm going to start Quills?
Yeah. Well, I previously I was working as a social worker. I was always entrepreneurial. All growing up, I wanted to volunteer. I wanted to help out. I wanted to start things. I started 2 or 3 small businesses when I was right out of college. They didn't go anywhere, but I learned a lot from just the attempt. So that was kind of hardwired into me already. And through a couple different life episodes, I landed in social work. And I thought it would be a short-term gig, but I ended up doing it for several years. And because I was entrepreneurial, I would always suggest new initiatives within the social work programs that I was working in. And pretty soon I was helping lead a group program, a group home program, a re-entry program for teenagers. And these were all, what you would think at-risk kids, male and female, usually between the ages of 15 and 18. And so to connect with them, I would go meet with them for their case reviews in coffee shops. And so I was taking primarily white kids from Eastern Kentucky area that had come from really bad living situations into the city, and they're here in Louisville. They've never really been to a big city, and I would take them to these coffee shops and I would explain the different coffee drinks to them. And so that's when I really started to see how coffee can have an impact, and I started teaching coffee, even though it was very casual. And through that, I was offered a part-time job, which is crazy that I was in, upper management, but I got burned out on that. And one of the coffee shops that I frequented regularly offered me a part-time job because they knew I was just such an enthusiast. So I decided to do it and learn basic barista skills. And this was circa 2001. And so on television and on the radio, there was talk of, this new food movement that was just slowly coming to our part of the United States here in Louisville. And what I mean by that is just there was the conversation was starting about, farm to table, about sustainability, about organic eating. Wild Oats was a store that came here. I don't think it exists anymore, but it was a predecessor to Whole Foods. And so for me, as somebody that enjoyed food and cooking and flavors, I loved that we were starting to have these conversations and see these kinds of stores. So it really started creating in me this idea of like, how could I jump into that? And how could I do it more than just an enthusiast, just as a hobby? And while I was working part-time as a barista at this local shop, I met a young lady who is now my wife. And she was in med school, and we, between the two of us, had family in Philadelphia and family in Seattle. And so while we were dating, we took some road trips to go visit our family. And it was in New York, going to some, third wave, kind of higher level coffee shops. I didn't know what third wave meant at the time. I don't even think that term existed.
We still don't know what that means right now. So
right. But I went into some boutique shops where there were people like me that I could tell they had, grown up on coffee, most likely. And now we're trying to refine it, and we're trying to study it and learn the nuances of coffee. And they were treating it more like wine, or treating it more like a craft spirit or a beer, and not just, making it hot and putting a bunch of cream and sugar in it. And I really, really enjoyed that. And when I traveled to Seattle, the very first aha moment, real aha moment as an entrepreneur in coffee was I went into Victrola on Capitol Hill. And I remember walking in and distinctly, again, this is another memory associated to smell. I could smell clean, fresh coffee. I just remember vividly that it was devoid of, the jute smell that you can smell if you go into so many coffee shops. I know right away if I'm gonna like the shop or not just by smelling it from outside. And there was no bagginess in the air, and it just smelled just amazing. I could smell the sweetness, the acidity, the chocolate, and I ordered a cappuccino, and it was rich and velvety, and it was delicious, and it was properly poured and properly extracted. And for me, that was just it changed my perspective on everything. And right then I told my wife, I said, I really think we could do this in Louisville. And so I hadn't left my career in social work completely, even though I was working part-time at the coffee shop. They called me back in to help pilot another program, again, because of my ideas and kind of initiative. And I did that, but as soon as I did, I realized it was a mistake. Just somewhere inside of me, I was like, this is not for me. I'd gotten a taste of barista life. I'd gotten to see some amazing boutique shops in the New York area, the Seattle area. And I had a budding relationship with some of your compadres over at Sunnergas. And I was talking to Matthew early on in the day just about how he was exploring coffee and what they were doing and how they were learning. And for a while, we even kicked around the idea of partnering together. But, we just had different philosophies on how we wanted to, run a small business. And I think that's great. And I'm really thankful that we're great friends to this day. But because I was watching them do it, because of the experiences I'd had in these other cities, because of the food movement, because of, my taste of barista life, I decided to just do it. So in 2005, I sat down with no business degree, only trying and kind of bootstrapping it. Learned how to write a business plan, put together a business plan, took some small business courses free through the city, and just started attacking the idea of starting a coffee shop.
Wow. So it kind of got its hooks in you, and that experience in Seattle. I love that happened at Victrola. I love that store on Capitol Hill. It's one of my favorites to go to. The idea of being able to know it's a great place just by the atmosphere of it and the smell of it. So great. So when you got started, just you made the switch in your mind, I'm going to do this in 2005. You had to say no to your past career, and there has to have been some kind of a tumultuous back and forth when you're making that decision, because you've got a sure thing. I mean, I would say it's a pretty secure career. I don't know much about it, but there's always a need for caseworkers. There's always a need for social workers, unfortunately. But your business might not succeed. How did you manage the risk versus the security?
I've always been a really firm believer in networking, and throughout my life, I didn't really know that that's what I was doing. Now I can say that after some experiences, after owning a business for 10 years. But I just started networking with people to help me make that decision. I had a lot of friends that owned other companies, CPAs. I was good friends with a guy that owned a successful record label, and he was able to sell it for a large profit. And he, retired that company, but he ran it well. I was friends with lawyers and people starting their own landscaping company, and it didn't matter. I just wanted to ask them, how did they navigate that decision making? How did they launch? What did they do well? What did they, do? Where were the missteps? Where would they have, done? What would they have done differently? Those sorts of things, and also talking about their fear, their anxiety, and also, just what was encouraging them. So for me, I was able to hear from multiple people, just their knowledge, their wisdom, and it helped me start to think through the pros and cons, the risk, the reward of, leaving a salary with, a retirement plan and benefits and starting something as foolish as a coffee shop. And I just looked at the terrain and after asking a lot of questions and, going back and forth with my wife, in a good way. We were doing this together. I mean, she was always super encouraging. And she was always, really a cheerleader for Quills. And we also knew at the time, we didn't have kids yet. We were both young. She was going to have some time in med school there was going to be several years of where she would have to be studying and be focused on her budding career. So it just made sense, to try it, swing for the fences. If we failed, it'd be okay. It wouldn't be the end of the world. I kind of knew the risk reward, and that's how I made the decision. And I also used, floating it and how I was floating the business plan and how I was floating the idea to people. And whatever the response would be, I would use that to help me navigate. Like, okay, I'm getting a lot of no's in this area, so maybe I need to tweak it and kind of move my business plan or move my ideas to another, just, to the left a little bit or to the right. It's just kind of navigating it through, and it helped me shape the business plan and the concept almost in real time. So I can't say that there was no anxiety, but I remember the day that I told my boss at my when I was in social work, and because I had spent so much time thinking it through, I'd spent so much time like dialoguing with other people. I had a lot of momentum already. I had a solid plan. I had a lot of good thoughts and strategy and numbers and data and all the stuff. He just said, hey, go for it. That sounds great. So I did, and here we are.
You're very prepared. It's not just a blind leap to follow your passion. You were pretty studious about all of this. Yeah. That's again. I've always networked. Like I said, I've always been one that has had a lot of friends and get a lot of input. Even if I'm, hey, where should I go on vacation, or what kind of car should I buy? I just want to ask a lot of people, not to get people's opinion so that I'm, in the populace crowd, just, again, just to field it and get the hands-on grassroots kind of feedback that helps me make the decision. So, sure.
And I think that's in most entrepreneurs have that. They may not be able to articulate it as well, but they do that. They usually ask a lot of good questions. At least they should.
So now that you've launched your business, on paper, essentially, the time has come for you to open the actual business. Like your first store was, when did it open? Well, it opened 10 years ago, and it was on Baxter, but it wasn't on the Baxter that it is on now.
Actually, it was on Kentucky. And Kentucky's a small street that runs parallel to Barrett Avenue. So we were actually over by, it used to be a really popular restaurant in the city called Lynn's Paradise Cafe. RIP to Lynn's. It's not there anymore. But we opened our first cafe right by their parking lot, which was great for us because that restaurant was so popular. It was a very popular brunch place. So many people would walk past the first location. And if there was a wait, which there was often like a 2-hour wait. People would come over and get coffee from us. And if not, they might stop in on their way back out. So we were there for, almost a year, after we opened. And then unfortunately that property, switched hands. The owner of the building had some personal problems and I think got in over their head on several things. And that was right as people were getting worried about the economic situation in the United States. And so the banks were super skittish, and somebody came in and wanted to buy the whole property, and they wanted to do that, but they wanted our space as well. So we weren't going to go to court over the lease. And I learned then that rental leases aren't that secure of a contract. And so, but I had become friends with another restaurateur here in town. He had become a regular at the cafe, and he had several properties and was actually kind of another person that I would just, ask questions about restaurant, what it means to run a restaurant, and what's his business like, et cetera, et cetera. And so we had a friendship, and he told me about a space that he owned up on Baxter, which is the space that the current Baxter location is in. So we shut down for about 4 or 5 months and relocated to the Baxter location.
Wow. That's for a new business, all of the research that you did before, and I was going to ask this earlier, like it's other people's experiences, and now you're having your own. And I'm sure that there is a lot of, probably some anxiety in the midst of all of this. What is it that, when you founded Quills, like what is the vision that kept you guys going steady to know that even though your business was being closed down for 4 or 5 months, it gave you the momentum to just open it back up? Because it doesn't sound easy.
No, it's not. In our first location, we so many things came together to really make Quills something special in just those short few months that we are open in our original location. Because we had taken the time to think through the aesthetics of the space, the bar flow, and how the bar was presented to the customers, since we thought through obviously the coffee and the preparation of lattes and cappuccinos. We offered something, unique to people that live here in the city, and everything from the name Quills to the original concept. We sold used books in the original store. We quickly dropped that because that was just too much work. It was like running 2 businesses. Oh. But I wanted to keep the vibe of the books and the romance of books in the space. So we had, bookshelves that were made to look like library shelves. Nice. And so within the first couple of months, we had a lot of people just obviously, coming through the doors, buying coffee, buying espresso, but just so many people thanking us for being there, excited about what we were offering as a new kind of coffee shop. They didn't know how to necessarily articulate it, but I also knew that we were onto something special when we had 2 or 3 property developers come in right away and just say, "I love what you're doing. Do you need investors?" I said, no. I thanked them, but it was too early on. I didn't know anything about that. I didn't know about expansion. I was just trying to get, my sea legs and get this thing going. But I was, encouraged and flattered, that they saw something in the branding and the name and the experience and the product in the space. And that, with the response of the rest of the community, there's just so much excitement about it, is what really motivated us to try to just shut down for a short amount of time and reopen as quickly as possible.
That's awesome. Yeah. So the support of the community, and also your team, your original staff. What kind of culture were you trying to create in your stores? Not that it's different now than it is then. Maybe it's changed over time, but what were you going for where, you've got people that are sticking with you and helping you get this through to be an established coffee business? Yeah.
Well, I'm a very relational guy. I've always been a relational guy, and enjoy getting to really know a person, know their story, know their history, and never to judge a book by its cover. And so, all while we were building out the original space, I'm working with people that I became very close with. And some of them were family members. Originally, my brother was my business partner. And then I had 2 other baristas that would become family members via, I don't know how the relationships works. It's my brother-in-law's little brother. So whatever that means to me. He and his soon-to-be wife, or maybe they were married at the time, I don't know, but they're family now, and they're great. And they were on board, and we had a few rotating cast members also that were just excited about coffee and excited about the idea that, in the process we became friends. So I had to do a lot of encouraging. I did have to, as the leader and as the entrepreneur, I had to make a lot of sacrifices. I tried to pay them as much as I could through the transition. I didn't pay myself much of anything during the transition.
Right.
And really just try to just be a friend, to be an encourager, to be as much of a coach and a cheerleader rolled into one as I could. And gave them things to do. They all wanted to put their hands on it. So even more so, I said, hey, let's go and let's do the new work together. Let's do the remodeling, swing some hammers, put up some paint. And man, everybody just all hands on deck. And, it was great. It was hard work, but it was great.
So what do you look for in staff? What were your goals when you brought people on, and what kind of things did you find yourself talking about all the time? Besides the transition from one space to the other, inside the cafe culture, in order to take care of these new customers that are really excited, like what does the conversation look like in those early years between you and the staff, and how did you select who you brought on?
I mean, I guess initially it was like, I'll take anybody, but no, I mean, I was, again, just super, super fortunate to already have some existing friendships and relationships with the people that came on board. And so we shared a lot of the same values. We really, valued hard work, integrity. We valued, camaraderie and what that means in the life of a cafe, laughing together, dreaming together, encouraging one another, tasting new things, tasting coffee together. There was a lot early on. There was just a lot of excitement about trying to create new drinks and recipes. And I was giving people a lot of freedom in that because I knew it was really motivating to them. So we often talked about just, the community that we're creating beyond just ourselves, and the responsibility that we have to do that well. And so that conversation is what we, I think was a part of the motivating factor. But they were also in on that too. It wasn't just me that tapped into that excitement and the community really rallying around what we were doing. They were all really, really excited. And also the third wave thing was coming online, and they were not just motivated to be involved with Quills, but also just the whole competition scene, which was new and exciting. And so there was its own culture was being created beyond me that included baristas from, other shops and in the region. And so they were motivated to get back online, as soon as possible, just to also be a part of that. So that was another big motivating factor, which is funny that they wanted to get back to work, to compete and work. But that's a reality of something that was going on. So.
That's awesome. So it just seems like something that's in the air when a coffee shop starts. There's just community is part of the DNA of a coffee bar, and I think we're
right.
wired as humans to desire community, and so the continuation of community really seems like something that we would all want to have a hand in, and so I'm glad to hear that the momentum was just uninterrupted, and it was hard, but here you are, and through all of that, you guys have just made incredible strides. And now that your shop was established, how long was it after running Baxter that you started to expand?
Yeah, we so that would have been in 2009. We started to explore the idea of roasting our own coffee. Up until then, we'd been kind of a hybrid multi-roaster. Started off at the first location, using Sunnergrass coffee, And then after a good run with Sunnergrass, we started using some coffees from Brown. I had a relationship with the guys down at Brown Coffee in Texas. Mm-hmm. And then we weren't multi-roaster in the sense of what a multi-roaster is today, where there's 4 or 5 coffees on tap or whatever. We were just doing 6-month runs, maybe a little bit longer of different roasters and bringing them in. And that was also so we could kind of just taste different coffees from around the country. Oh. And once we got put our hands on a small roaster, that had a little IR3, we didn't have a place to put it. We thought about putting it in the back of Baxter, but the fire marshal wouldn't allow us, the way the building was constructed, to put it back there without a lot of remodeling, which we really didn't want to go through. So I started to scout the area looking for a place that might work to house a little roaster. And I just happened to stumble into some space across the river in New Albany. So, with Louisville being a river city, there's the Kentuckiana area, and there's, Louisville, and then right across the river is the city of New Albany. And the city of New Albany at that time was going through a little bit of a resurgence. There was a lot of Louisville restaurants that were opening their second locations in downtown New Albany. It was a historic district. It had a lot of interesting architecture. The city was giving some really good tax incentives for people to relocate. The state of Indiana has really good taxes regarding inventory. So for greens inventory, it was a really good move if we could do that. And I found a space that actually worked really well for roasting, and it was so inexpensive. I couldn't believe the price for the square footage, and it was much more than we needed for the roastery. So we decided, what if we opened a cafe over there as well in Indiana? And so we we did a little research. We talked to the city. They were just thrilled that a coffee shop would entertain the idea of opening up in their downtown corridor. So they threw some grant money at us, which made the decision that much easier. So we started roasting in there way before we opened the actual cafe. We just started roasting. We fixed that area up in the back, started roasting coffees, trying to figure out what that meant, and, ordering and forecasting and production and all that. And I'd say about 5 months behind, on the heels of roasting coffees over there, we opened up our New Albany location. And again, people were excited. We had enough staff that were well trained to be able to put some lead folks over there, and have the quality remain and have the culture remain, which was exciting. So that was our first expansion move, and I throughout all of our expansion and through all of the growth, there's never been for me like a map or a master plan that says I want to go here and here and here. It's always, again, very organic, very relational. And when I was scouting out the space for the roastery, I was literally walking down the sidewalk admiring the historic architecture of this downtown corridor, and somebody yelled out my name. And it was a girl that I didn't know. She's now an employee, and she's worked here for, like 6 or 7 years. Oh, wow. Yeah, she's like, "Hey, you're the Quills guy." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm the Quills guy." She's like, "I love your shop, blah, blah, blah." And she's like, "Come and see the space." And she was actually working part-time in one of these buildings. And she's the one that introduced me to this amazing space that ultimately, housed the roastery and our second cafe. So it was just very organic and just sort of happened. And, that was great. And that was the case with our third location as well. I was, approached by a regular at Baxter who, I respected, as much as you can can respect a regular that you get to know across the bar. He's a nice guy. He seemed very well educated and knew a lot about coffee. I felt good about him, and he'd been coming in for, well over a year. And he's like, "Hey man, no pressure, but I, got this pitch from a property development company that's opening up a building at the University of Louisville. And, as you probably know, the University of Louisville is a really large university, but because of the way the city was built, it was always a commuter school. There was never really a proper college town. And I went to school there, so I was excited about the idea of a fledgling college town, college life experience for the students that were there. And I always thought, it needed a really good coffee shop. And so I was hesitant just to obviously sign a deal with developers that I didn't know. And I just played it very cool and talked to my friend that was pitching the idea. He connected me with these property developers, and we had lots of lunches and, coffees together, and ended up becoming friends through the process. And again, it was just very natural, never felt, strange. It was just very organic growth that led us to our third location down at the university.
So you're walking into these opportunities almost literally.
Right.
But you're at the same time, you're open to expansion. You're thinking, your business is growing, so you got to be kind of thinking it would be nice to open another store, or like you're looking for a roaster. As you expanded from one store to now 3 stores and a roastery, human resources kind of hate that term though, because it's not very friendly. But just staff and organization of your business is a pretty big deal. Like, one of the main things that makes me anxious about any expansion is, how are you going to maintain the culture that you loved and that the customers love from store to store? And I wonder if you could share with us what you did to first kind of organize the staff, like managers and your leadership in your company that you had to invent along the way, and then maintain a culture and allow that to sort of proliferate instead of die.
Right. Well, by now, I had learned enough about the metrics of the company. I knew what kind of cash flow we needed. I knew what we were hoping to project, year over year. I knew what kind of percentages we were trying to hit from the business side. So I kind of grown into that. So through these organic relationships and opportunities, yes, I'm listening to my gut and to the organic relational side, but I'm also weighing that against good business sense. What I continued to do was what I had done at the very beginning, and that's just really keep open those lines of communication and really lean into the relational aspects of who I am as a leader, who the team is, and their relationship to me, their relationship to one another, their relationship to the company vision. And so, I just communicated, and even when I thought I was communicating enough, there was oftentimes I wasn't. It just takes constant, the message to be constantly before everybody, to have everyone buy in to the vision of expansion. And I think I can understand it that if you're working for a company, and when a small company is starting and there's a collective vision that everyone's bought into, as soon as there's any hint of that kind of going off the rails or turning in a different direction, that creates anxiety for people, because they think, oh man, it's going to become something that I didn't sign up for initially. Are we becoming the man? Are we going corporate? Are we going to change our values? And so that anxiety just requires a lot of nurturing, interaction, to talk about it, to reinforce the vision. And some people, did move on. They didn't want to be a part of the expansion, but I'm really, grateful that most everybody, about a 90% retention rate throughout all of the expansion, is what we've we've had about a 90% retention rate, which has been great
Oh,
because
that's great.
yeah, I mean, because people, came to understand that getting bigger and expanding doesn't have to mean loss of, your company values. I just kept telling them, when you create something that's wonderful and people love, whether it's, a cup of coffee or a telephone or a piece of clothing, whatever it may be, how do we responsibly give that to more and more people that want to be a part of that product, want to be a part of that company? And then, how do you do that at a healthy pace so that as you do grow, you don't lose your own way? And so we again just had I opened my door up to one-on-one conversations, town hall meetings, emails, staff meetings, official staff meetings, unofficial staff meetings at a bar or over pizza, whatever, just to reinforce that no one was being, duped, that the wool wasn't being pulled over anyone's eyes, and also that when you're in a creative industry like coffee, like in any kind of boutique industry, when you're working with a lot of creative people, you have to be mindful of this because they are working oftentimes for something much bigger than a paycheck for the money. They really want to make a difference in the local community. They really want to know their team and their coworkers. And so there's another sort of values that they're investing in within the life of the small business. And if they feel like that's being threatened or that's going to go away, they'll move on. And so because that's not what was happening, we just had to just really share that and say that over and over. And once there was a collective buy-in within the main leadership, it became a lot easier because it started to perpetuate, that people have a trust. And I think, it takes some time to build up trust, but once they see trust in their leadership, then it's a lot easier because after the third location, the next couple locations were a lot easier because I think the employees and the management team had a level of trust within me and other upper leaders, upper management. And they knew that they don't have to agree with every minutia, every little decision, but they were in alignment with the greater vision, of Quills. And they knew we weren't going to just throw the baby out with the bathwater. So it was, it's been, challenging, but very rewarding. It's great to have a team like that now that really, has a lot of trust, and they've all grown as well, as have I. We've all grown in our leadership abilities, our ability to lead teams and cast vision, and at the same time stay true to making great coffee and having great customer service.
You could have easily just forced your will in because it's your business,
Right.
It is your quote unquote right to do so. And I imagine a lot of owners feel a sense of frustration sometimes, maybe when there's this pushback, but at the same time, I feel like a lot of owners want people to take ownership in their positions. And that seems like the other side of ownership is that you're going to get called to the mat, for lack of a better term.
Right.
Did it help you kind of crystallize reasons and the why behind the expansion as you had these conversations and as you listened to them talk about their concerns? Did that help the vision get more clear to even you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, every time that I sit down and think about why do I do what I do, why does Quills do what it does, it helps, crystallize even more so. Every time there's a new facet that I understand a little bit better. So yes, I mean, I talk about the why of Quills more than I talk about coffees we're sourcing or, initiatives on the drink menu, whatever that we might be doing in the season. And so for the team, that was always really important. And for me, it was also a very calculated business decision. I didn't necessarily I never opened up Quills to just be a owner operated shop. I knew that I enjoyed making coffee, and I enjoyed learning how to be a better barista. But what I really enjoyed was the creating of community, and the creating of a hospitality environment. And I knew that I would have to have team members around me that could do coffee better than me, so that I could help grow the other side of the company, so that more customers could have that kind of experience, so that we could maintain culture, so that we could keep a focus on really genuine hospitality. So it was a decision for me, early on, to sacrifice in many different ways to put others in front of me, and not to just impose my will and say, this is the way we're going to do it, to say, hey, I'm looking for a collective buy-in, because I know that if I have a collective buy-in and we all see the vision of this company together, then everyone can play their different roles, and I don't have to be chained to just owner operator, which would stunt the growth, and I see so many businesses that kind of get caught in that cycle where they can't work on the business because they're running the business.
Right.
And so that was important for me.
It's that whole, what is the book, Michael Gerber's book, The E-Myth Revisited, working in your business versus on it. That's excellent. And anyone listening should definitely pick that book up. But
one of the best books I've read in business.
Yeah, it is. It's eye-opening, and it shows, it forces you into a state of humility almost, because you realize that things can run without you, even if you're pretending like they can't. You can set it up to run without you, and that's a healthier way to run a business. But so you got this team that now is on board, and I imagine that's helped in the most recent expansions. Have been what I guess I would call more, I don't want to say aggressive, but a little bigger. Yeah.
It took about 8 years to really come to a place to have the strength of an infrastructure, having enough of the core leadership that understands not only how to make great coffee, but how to run a great business. It took us that much time to understand what it means to have, a strong sense of brand, to have a strong sense of, community, both physically and, now within social media, and how do we leverage those things in a healthy way? How do we leverage our own influence among the team, among the other baristas, and how do we, as leaders, cast vision, serve one another, put out, just deal with, human resource issues and all of that. That's just you kind of learning what it means to be a business. And it took us that about 8 years to get to the point where then I could step back and say, hey, now I think we're ready for another round. I think we're ready to, take the brand and share it regionally, even nationally, and expand, like you said, in a little more of an aggressive fashion. And that was primarily driven because we needed to roast more coffee. So I knew that if we were going to roast a little more coffee, it didn't make sense for us to just roast just jump up like a few pounds. We needed to really jump in and look at, the volume of output and what we needed to do, financially to make sense for another round of expansion that would reflect the growth that we had and the leadership that we have now. So yeah, the team has been critical in where we are today with the new roastery and the new cafe here. And a new one, a sixth one on the way. So.
All right. Looking forward to that. That's so 6 locations after a little place by Lynn's Paradise Diner 10 years ago. And I mean, if any of you get the chance to come to Louisville, you definitely got to check out the Firehouse location. It's a beautiful, fantastic coffee campus, essentially, is what it is. That's my first impression, at least. But y'all are doing such amazing things there, and I wonder what advice throughout these 10 years, as you've been building this relational organization, serving the city and now serving the industry, really, and beyond. What advice would you give to entrepreneurs, people who are in the midst of maybe their first store and they're looking at expanding? What advice would you give them to focus them and help them do the right things and not just things?
I think the number one piece of advice that I tend to share with people in these kinds of conversations is, self-awareness is critical. I think that there are a lot of amazing skills that entrepreneurs tend to have. And I know that there are certain skills that you can develop in home, but I would argue one of the most important skills for anybody running a business and any kind of leadership position is self-awareness. Know what you're good at, know what you're not good at, quantify those things, and then find people or resources to help you in the areas that you're deficient. It doesn't mean that you can't grow in those areas. I think you should, but I've always been very aware of my limitations and where, I am not skilled in a certain area. I'm going to try to find someone who's got that skill set and who can buy into the greater vision of what we're trying to do at Quills. And then they could run with that area that I'm deficient in. And I just keep doing that all around me. And now the team is doing that for themselves. They've learned to look at themselves, be humble enough to do, a self-assessment and know, hey, here's where I'm really strong and here's where I'm really not so strong and I need to grow and I need some help in these areas. So how do we do that? So that's critical. And it sounds so simple, but unfortunately, I've seen lots of business owners that don't have that kind of self-awareness. And, I see that limiting their ability to grow and to be successful or to have an impact in their community. So I think that's really important, just to know yourself, and then to know your team. I think is really important, just to really take time to understand what motivates the people that are around you, that are on your team. I think we assume a lot just because they're getting a paycheck, but we shouldn't do that. We should take the time to find out, what do they really value, what do they really care about, and then how can those things be introduced into the life of the company. And sometimes they can't, but most of the time they can, and they can then feel that much more invested in what you're doing because they've got a place for their voice to be heard, even if it's just a little bit. And I think that's two simple things that I tell people. Know yourself, know your team, and the other thing that I mentioned earlier on is network. Man, I spend a lot of time just getting to know the city, getting to know people in the industry, getting to know people just in the the local business association, chamber of commerce. That stuff pays off so much over time. Those networks, because people want to help each other out and people want to champion what you're doing. At least most people do. And so I always tell people, if you're starting a business, take the time to invest in networking with your community and within your industry. Don't just put it off on the back burner. Really, really take some time to do that.
Wow. Those are three, like you said, seemingly simple things, but takes a lot of time and focus to be able to look for opportunities to develop them in the practice daily. It's not going to be easy, right?
It's not. I mean, you really have to be disciplined and be open enough to what that's going to require of you as the business owner to again, be humble, swallow your pride sometimes, be open to learning, but then also it gives you confidence to lean into what you are strong, what you are gifted at, and people want you to do that. So know yourself, know your people, network. And have a good CPA. That's another piece of advice, man.
Probably do that early on.
CPA. Yeah, do that early on. And I'm surprised how many people don't do that. Get a good CPA.
Nice. So what's next for Quills, and how can we stay in touch with you all to stay updated on that?
Yeah. Well, we're in the process of opening our 6th location on the east side of town, an area of town that for years, customers have been coming in from the east side of town saying, please open a shop over here. And, we resisted, but as the city has grown and changed over the years, it's really a hotbed for, it's a popular place where people want to move into and live. And it's over near a really amazing park system. And so we're excited to have a presence over there. So we're actually moving into a space with another small business, actually a popsicle company called Steel City Pops. They actually found this great building. It's actually another firehouse, and it's about 5,000 square feet. So it's too big for a coffee shop. And it was too big for them, but they fell in love with Quills a few years ago and have a lot of their management meetings at one of our locations. And they said, hey, what do you think of this idea of, popsicles and coffee? And man, the more we talked about it, we're like, that could be really, really fun. So we're playing off this whole hot and cold theme, and we're going to have a shared space. There'll be 2 POS systems, so you'll have 2 counters that you can walk in, and to the right will be Quills, to the left will be Steel City. But I think we're trying to make it really a fun space for all ages, and so that you can go there with your whole family, and kids can get pops, and mom and dad can get some coffee. So we're in the thick of construction on that location. So we're doing that now. Then after that, I really just want to focus on what we have. I want to focus on, like you said, this coffee campus here in the Nulu district, and just focus on our roasting and just get better at roasting coffee and get better at our production practices. And we've got a space here now that allows us to educate those in the industry, and also just educate people that are, walking through the doors looking for a cup of coffee. Just, on the retail side, we can do little tours and classes and educate people on specialty coffee and what that means. And that's already started to happen just because of the proximity of our space. And so people are excited about that. So we want to kind of grow that area of our business and that educational piece to the retail customer. We don't know exactly what that means. We've done brewing classes before, but a lot of people are just, really curious about where coffee comes from, and learning a little bit about the agriculture, and then, how to make it taste a little bit better in their kitchen. So we're hoping to do a lot of that in the next year and a half. And as far as staying in touch, we have a fancy website that, people can check out, quillscoffee.com, and find us on the social media interwebs. That's how to keep up with us on Twitter and Instagram, or you can just come in and ask for me, and I'll say hello.
Nice.
So,
well, thank you so much for taking time today and just sharing the story and the values that have helped grow Quills to what it is today. I think a lot of this has been so inspirational, and I know that's probably helped a lot of people who are in the beginning stages of their own business. So thanks very much, Nathan.
Well, thanks, Chris. And, I want to thank you, man. I have not listened to that many of the Founder Fridays, but I've listened to a lot of your other episodes, and I hope that it creates the platform for you, man. I think that you're you've got a very calming but educational presence about you. And so I hope that you're encouraging a lot of baristas and coffee folks out there.
Oh, shucks.
Good work, man. Good work.
No, thanks. Making me blush over here. Well, thanks very much again, Nathan. It was a pleasure.
All right. Thanks, man.
Well, I am grateful to do these episodes. I'm grateful to hear the stories of entrepreneurs and the struggles and the successes, the means by which they have overcome these things. And hearing these stories from Nathan just makes me appreciate Quills and what they mean here locally, but also, what they've come to be in the greater platform of specialty coffee. Just makes me appreciate them all the more. And some of the keys to his success from this conversation was that he always kept the why of the business in the front of his mind. And in the process of forming up the business, he put his team members first, put the people first that were working for him. So in this process of having to shut down his store for 4 or 5 months, if shutting down your store for any length of time is, even for construction, is a really nerve-wracking thing for an owner. And doing that for 4 or 5 months, a lot of people might not have survived it. A lot of people might have just had second thoughts halfway through, like at the 2-month mark, and then said, we're not going to start it back up. He didn't take a paycheck, paid his staff, wanted to retain that team that he had built to be able to work in the next store. I think that's really admirable. So good on Nathan for that. Now, working to put people first also means that you are putting people in positions, delegating authority to people to do things that you're not good at so that you can do the things that you're good at. And then you get to grow. If you don't do that, then you do end up stagnating. You don't allow the business to grow because it's only as big as you are. And honestly, as dynamic a personality as you might have, you're probably not going to grow a business to be as healthy as it could or to reach its potential as much as you could with a team of people all on board for the same thing, utilizing their strengths within that company. And that's what he did. That's one of the keys to their success. Also, maintaining the culture through this time of expansion was really critical for them. That kind of thing took a lot of time and effort, and it took getting collective buy-in from his staff. That meant that people were on board as they opened up different stores. Not every single person, but he said he retained like 90% of the people because of the effort he put into just having their voices be heard, having conversations, making sure that the fears were addressed, questions were answered, ideas were heard. If you do this, you might even hear things that you don't want to hear, but that can really help you make your business better. Take the time to have these kind of conversations with your team, involve them as much as you can, even if it's uncomfortable. And it takes a lot of time because, one of the keys to their success, again, was this collective buy-in and the retention of that culture from shop to shop. Not every shop who expands can do that. And sometimes you lose customers because you lose what made you, you. So those are some of the keys to their success. He's not imposing his own will. He's really giving away a lot of authority and delegating authority to people and their strengths. Getting collective buy-in, maintaining the culture throughout the company, and making sure that they take the opportunities that come to them that make sense for those things. And so team really is the theme here, the why, and having a great team. So advice that Nathan has for those of us who are thinking about opening our own store, or maybe those of us who are owners of a store, whether a veteran of the industry or you're just getting started, there are 3 things that he says are really critical. So number 1 is that you have to know yourself. You have to practice self-awareness and become more aware of your strengths, your weaknesses, especially because you're a leader and leaders are looked to as an example, whether you want to be or not, and it will affect how people work. It'll affect how people think about you and your business. So that was number 1. And the second thing he said is that you have to know your team. And he says, we assume we know who people are, but we have to take time to find out what they really value and what they care about. And you retain that. Have a space in your head for that. And if it's not in your head, then keep a space in your notebook for that and know who is working for you. Value them as people, not just as numbers, not just as people pushing your agenda forward. And you would want that for yourself if you were working in a coffee shop. Admit it, you would. It's a human need. So in these cases too, Nathan says, when you find out what they care about, sometimes your coffee shop can be a platform for their cause. Not every time, not every barista, especially not in larger companies. You can't have like every vision realized within a shop because you have to have a unified mission and vision and thing, you know? But if you're not looking, you could miss some really great opportunities to show how much you care about your people, and B, for your business, you're just creating a more dynamic environment for your customers to be a part of, because they see that your concern is not just about what you're doing in coffee, but also what you're doing in things outside of coffee. So anyway, know your team, take time to find out what they value and what they care about, and where possible, as after you've heard their voice, which is so important, you might be able to incorporate what you learn into the company. So first, know yourself, be self-aware. Then, number 2, know your team and find out what they value and care about. See if there's a possibility to even give platforms to what they care about in your shop. And number 3 is to network. So I say network, and the first thing that I think of is something smarmy, something salesy, somebody pushing a business card, across the table and, saying, hey, call me, okay? I got a good deal for you, okay? I don't know. That's my New York-ish accent. But I think there's a stereotype in our head about networking because it's such a common word and ubiquitous term. Just like customer service can be seen as robotic and dry, rehearsed, rote, whatever. But there are positive sides. You can achieve customer service that is genuine and not disingenuous. And networking is the same thing. Networking, just think of networking as forming relationships on purpose. Purposeful relationships. You don't just have to have friendships with people and relationships with people that just rely purely on serendipity. Like, we just happen to be scheduled together and now we're best friends. That's great, but you can choose to be friends with somebody too. You can choose to get to know someone because you have common interests too. So nothing wrong with that. And you get to know people, you get to know your industry, like the coffee industry, by going to trade shows, being curious about these things, and getting to know your city. This was really, really good what Nathan said. Your city has so much going on in it, and you probably don't know half of what's going on because you're busy with your business. Take time to go out there and find out what's happening at the mayor's office. What's happening in the city council? What are the projects that are being funded for your city? Some of them will impact your business. Others you can participate in and be a catalyst for change. And put your name out there, put your brand out there, and serve. Just like you do your customers, you can serve your city. And these opportunities that a lot of coffee shops end up with, like hearing about a space that comes up available all of a sudden, some of these things come through relationships that you develop with people who know about it. You're going to benefit in the long run. So again, get to know people, get to know your industry, and venture out into the city and see what's going on. And over time, it's going to really pay off. So know yourself, know your team, find out what they value and care about, and then network with people. Find out about your industry and your city and get to know all of those things over time and involve yourself with it. And of course, the fourth thing, the bonus at the end there, is you got to find a good CPA, and probably sooner than later. So good advice from Nathan. And my thanks once more to Nathan for breaking down all of this for us and sharing the stories, sharing the successes, the challenges. And we're excited to see that new shop opening up soon and all of the cool things going on at Quills just continuing to get better. So now I want to turn your attention to something that's very important, not just to me, but especially to Quills. And you might have heard on October 3rd this year, 2017, Frances Feeney, 24-year-old barista at Quills in Indy, was tragically killed in a cycling accident. And our hearts are just broken for our coffee family at Quills and for the family of Frances Feeney especially. And the folks at Quills are putting on a throwdown in honor of Frances on the 3rd of November, which is next Friday. And I will be linking to that in the show notes and also posting it on the Keys to the Shop Twitter and Instagram account as well. I would encourage all of you that are in the area that can make it to that throwdown to go down there and support the cause. Go and throw down and take part in, I believe there's going to be a raffle. Now, for those of you who can't make it to the throwdown, there is a GoFundMe page. I will be linking to that GoFundMe page for Francis Feeney on the Keys to the Shop website, as well as the on Twitter and Instagram. So make sure you get there and check that out and donate what you can to the cause to help raise money for his family. And the goal they're trying to raise $16,000. They have, at this recording, they have $2,600. They're hoping that they raise a lot of money over at the throwdown, but coming at this from these two angles will really help. So if you can, again, participate in that throwdown. Go to the GoFundMe page if you can't show up. It would just mean the world to his family, as well as to our coffee family at Quills. So thank you in advance, those of you who are able to do that. So that'll be our show today, everyone. If you have questions or comments, suggestions on how we can make this show more valuable to you in your coffee career, and to your business, just let me know by emailing chris@keystotheshop.com. And I thank you again for joining me on the show, and hope that you can take some of the things that you learned here in this episode and apply them to your career, apply them to your staff in your cafe, and see how much success you get from these really great principles of leadership and entrepreneurship from Nathan Quillo. I think they're going to take you far. And all the best to you. And as always, I hope that this episode, as well as every episode on this show, has given you keys to the shop.